right. Hello, everyone. We're going to call the Thursday, January 5th work session of Borough Council to order. Ms. Bryan, will you call the roll?
Absolutely. Council President Fred Bush.
Here.
Council Vice President Michelle Panopoulos. I see you on Zoom there, yes.
Oh, there we go.
Oh.
We can't hear you, Michelle.
It doesn't say she's muted, she just doesn't have any audio.
Did she hear us?
Yeah, it sounds like you can hear us, right? Yeah,
Yes,
she can hear us.
Can hear us.
But
yeah, we can't hear you, so.
Maybe just check her audio.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alright, let's all continue on the roll for a minute.
Okay.
Give her a minute to get that. Councilmember Barbara Portner here. Councilmember Rob McGreevy.
Here.
Councilmember Cindy Rickards. Here. Councilmember Ira Winston. Mayor Andrew Deutsch. Here.
All right. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda that are proposed? Okay. I do have a brief comment, which is that an important tax document has been sent out to borough residents from a company called Berkheimer, which handles the earned income tax for Montgomery County. So if you receive this, please open it and take a look and make sure that the information is correct. Some of that information has been sent out in a borough-wide email if you subscribe to the borough email list. If you don't subscribe to the borough email list, I encourage you to. But yes, please do open that envelope if you receive it and make sure the information there is correct. Those are my comments. Ms. Mayor, your comments?
Thanks. I want to wish everyone a happy new year. I look forward to a very productive year in the borough, working together. The only comment I want to talk about is many of you must have seen what happened on Monday Night Football, where a young man suddenly had a cardiac event. And I just want to remind folks, it can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. We have multiple AED devices in the borough. One is at the top of the stairs at Borough Hall. So if anybody's in a meeting or anything like that happens, there's one right there. Another one is in the field house. On the main fields. And the field house is open whenever sporting events are happening. All our officers have AED devices in their cars. They always have an AED available, so if anything is happening, remember to call 911 first, and then before proceeding to do anything else. The fire company also has AED devices available with them as well. So there are multiple ways to get an AED device to you at any given time in the borough. So I just want to remind people that it's a resource that's available just in case the need arises.
And that's what they used on the field.
And they did, and it likely saved his life.
Thank you. Let's move on to public comment. I'll start in the room. Does anybody in the room wish to make a public comment? Any members of the public? Seeing none. Is there anyone online? I can't tell.
no, there's no one online.
Okay.
There's no one from the public online.
All right. So let's move on to our first presentation item. 7A, the Town Square Phase 1 draft designs.
I will share my screen here for the benefit of everyone in the room and for anyone watching the recording in the future. I'm pleased to once again welcome Bill Collins from Simone Collins, our planner that we've brought on board for this project. And I'm going to operate the slideshow here while Bill talks through where we're at with the Station Square plan. So Bill, thanks for coming out here.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone. Nice to be here. I'm going to run through these quickly, but stop me at any time. didn't quite know who would be the audience or be prepared to go through the process that we went through. It's 9 months. Got a lot done in 9 months, and you'll see. Next, please. The scope of work that was in the RFP and fleshed out in our proposal. Next. Quite a number of meetings. There were more than we planned, and the blue lines are the grant applications that were submitted. That was not originally envisioned at the time you had the RFP, but the opportunities arose and you decided to go after them, and so there's actually 4. 2 were due on the 27th. And I'll talk about those a little bit more. Next, please. We were impressed by the charrette process by your community and the quality and the detail of information that came out of the first 2 meetings. So the committee itself did a lot of work to try to congeal all that information. And the original sketches that people did at those meetings were given to us. And then we tried to interpret them. And there was generally 2 types of designs. One with some kind of roadway going through the site. And that's this cluster. The next one, we call that vehicular egress options. Next. And a square design that eliminated any roadway through it. Those were the 2 basic types. There were a lot of ideas on design details. We tried to acknowledge those as best we could. We spent most of our time on making sure that the elements that were primary, the transportation elements, the spatial use elements, avoiding utilities, all those geometric things, we tried to use all the data that you had, existing surveys, surface and below surface, to try to come up with a design that was as feasible as we could with the data we had. Next, please. This is a summary of ideas from the first 2 meetings. Next, please. There was an inventory. Many events we found throughout the year that use both the Station Square, Haverford, and the side streets as well. So and the way that they're used, we mapped them, and so that gave us an indication of where to describe your project boundaries. And we determined that to be from Forest to Essex. That's a good, viable project area, and the Station Square. But the other thing that we did was we soon found out that you couldn't really start designing the Station Square in earnest unless you had some kind of notion about how you would remedy the missing accessibility to and through the station. And so part of the work of the grant applications that we'll show you informed the station design. And we did determine with the data that you have that you can retrofit the existing what we call tunnel. We're calling that the tunnel. That the grades work for potential to create a new underpass that's on the Essex Avenue alignment underneath the railroad. That would have ramps up to the station platform, and there's also an opportunity to connect your new Essex Avenue bridge with ramps down to both stations, east and westbound. So next, please. We tried to. Then we did a number of these functional diagrams where we took those ideas and saw how they fit. We vetted them through the committee. Next, please. And then started to put them into the geometry. So you can see this is one option. We did maybe 5 or 6 different options to test how different functions would work Where would the kiss and ride be? Where could parking be? How much parking? Could we remove the egress? Could we live with an egress? And then where would the access to the station that would be ADA accessible happen? Next, please. So this is just a quick sketch. It's an image that we sketched over to show you what we believe on the north side of the station, under Station Square, that you can retrofit a ramp down to the tunnel with steps. Okay. The right-of-way here, even though the station canopy is SEPTA's, part of that canopy is on borough property, according to the surveys. So there's leverage, at least on the north side, to try to push a project like this ahead. Now, pushing a project like this ahead in partnership with SEPTA and Amtrak doesn't make any sense unless you could do the same thing on the south side, because you need to get that through accessibility. We believe the same thing can happen on the south side. We don't have the survey for that. But just observation, we think it could work around the existing canopy, and in the next phase, we think the canopy structure itself can be retrofitted to improve the architecture. So with all that, we came up with two options. We started out with an option that would be pedestrian-only Station Square space, and then we went and studied an option B that is a square with an egress road, and I'm going to show you both of those. We showed them to the committee, just the geometrics of the space, without any depiction of uses, activities, people using those spaces. And the committee asked us to show some ways that they might be used. And so we're going to show you plan views of different uses and how flexible we tried to make this space, and how integrated we tried to make the Station Square with that block of Haverford. Next, please. So option A is pedestrian-only plaza. This is everyday use. So how could you use it? How could you use this? Well, some of the elements in this and that are common to all of the designs are Haverford Avenue that still has parking on the north side, has bump outs, has designated crosswalks, and on either end has a raised table. So that the idea that came from the public that the sidewalk would be flush all the way across. That can work grade-wise, we know that. There'll have to be drainage improvements because the water runs downhill, but these tree lines, we think we can get those in so that they're continuous planting environments and not just singular tree pits. And the grading works so that they're offset from the underground utilities, those ones that you prefer not to touch. And we think that there's a possibility to have them function as stormwater BMPs as well. And the hydraulics, we think, could work underneath. These are kind of like decks that bridge the environment for growing, so the water can flow underneath it and then drop into your system, which travels west. There's a dedicated bike lane here. It's a contraflow, meaning it's going against the traffic. And you did a study on that, and we showed the geometry of what that would be. It's striped. There's no delineators here. You could put delineators in, but the beauty of this is that if somebody has to pass in this zone, they can use that area to pass. It's all one grade. The paving, we tried to show different paving options. That's really a detailed design. But the idea that the paving would move across, and that there's certain kinds of design treatments that could show directional paving and also plaza paving. Uses here shows benches, lights, tables with umbrellas. And here's your ramp system. suggesting that this become a wider entry here. You abandon this this step stays, and the ramp goes down to the tunnel. So that works grade-wise. There's certain things that we identified where you want to try to maximize the environmental benefits. That was a strong suggestion from the community. So shading heat island. Obviously, the north side would shade the sidewalk in those buildings, so trying to get a dense canopy there or reestablish one because you already have one. But here on the west side, if you could cluster a planting environment that would get a greater canopy, you could do the same thing with the summer sun when it comes when it hits that. And this would start to shade that part of the plaza. We kept it open. And you'll see, if we go to the next slide, this had kiss and ride parking. This one also does, but this shows with an event tent. That's a 50 by 50 square. And some smaller tents, Christmas tree. There was a thought about putting in a water feature. You'll see that show a couple different locations, right? And then tables and chairs, bike parking. And let's see what else is different here. State store, this is the most difficult area to get grading for ADA accessibility on your whole site. It's the steepest right here. Technically non-compliant. If we don't touch it, you don't have to do anything. But it's over 5% there in that small area. And then in each of these cases, there would be some kind of control here from the existing drive that could be removable if this was a pedestrian-only plaza. And the paving could be designed to handle the traffic, and that would be a detail. We're trying to consider loading areas. There might be a way to back a truck in here if things can be changed. I know Jim's going to talk about, how does this work? This building needs a lot of work. I'm going to show you a couple ideas that might fit in with your Station Square project. Next, please. And then third, use of the space as a performance venue.
How about loading areas for the stores on the north side of the building? Like where, if they have trucks that need to load.
For the state store?
No, across the street.
Okay. So in this case, if a truck was standing here and cars wanted to pass past them, there's no curb there.
Okay.
So this is not, it's not even mountable, it's flush. So you know how you move into another lane? You'd be basically moving into another lane and you'd be navigating that. If a truck was standing, these are flush parking spaces, they're double. If a truck came in and was standing and unloading there, these bays could work that way too. I mean, really, that's what you're doing now.
That's kind of what we're doing now, yeah.
So the venue, we're showing you oriented to the west in this case. It might orient to the station. The new canopy might become a backdrop for a temporary stage. There's all kinds of architectural options once you start thinking about this structure. But the space is flexible enough so that you can have options when you get into design, or once it's designed, you want to keep those use options. And in this case, we're showing that it would be an event where you close off with temporary barriers, and you might have food trucks inside there that aren't movable vehicles. Next, please. Option B, similar, but this shows a geometric delineation of the square that includes an outlet drive. No inlet. Next, please. In this case, the carway is 16. We're showing planting areas on both sides. It doesn't have to be like that. We think if you're going to put a road through here, you still want to get shading there. This could bump out to give more area to these buildings here. If you wanted a commercial streetscape al fresco environment there, but then you're going to be borrowing your main space. So this is a trade-off. And this is going to, either one, whichever you go with, has to be negotiated. We're showing this with no curves. So everything's still flush. And then, in general, the geometry of Haverford is the same. Next, please. It does make the space a little bit tighter, the open space, but you're still got 50-50 canopy in here. Christmas tree, less canopies on the main space. Next, please. Venue orients a different way. Could be a deeper audience. There's a lot of options here. Temporary stage goes this way, facing the station. So what you have now is two basic designs. You don't have to make a decision now. We know that the geometry for most of the major things that people wanted to see can work in some way. We try to use existing standards for how that would work. In this case, the driveway out would still have to go west, right? We think that if this was the case, we want to look at a couple different scenarios for this one. Next, please. Okay, so just to give you a person's eye view, sections through these spaces, here's where we cut the sections looking this way and looking this way towards the north. Next. Okay, looking to the east, Haverford, this gives you a sense of scale. With the parking, with the travel lane, with the contraflow bikes, planting, sidewalk by the state store, sidewalk with tables on the north side of Haverford. Next. This is cut through Haverford and the plaza, so you can see the scale of the plaza before you approach the platform. And the grid, it's not that steep of a grade. It doesn't show up well on this, but it's somewhere between 2 and almost 5%. Next, please.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I always have so many trouble orienting myself to these schemes. But just to clarify, so the ramp is accessible only to north and south side and not actually to the SEPTA platform.
So when you say the tunnel, is that what you mean? The
Correct.
Tunnel? Okay. So the tunnel is not accessible currently.
Yes.
If you put ramps in on both sides,
Yes.
it would be accessible to your streets and to your platform.
And to the platform.
Yes,
Okay.
because there's only a minor. Let's say this ramp goes in, right? It's a maze because that's the way that you got to get to the grade. But once you get to this sidewalk here,
Okay.
you can run at an accessible grade, and you have to go down to here, but you can get onto the platform here.
Okay, and so you
both
can run
sides.
under the tunnel and actually up to the platform, both sides. Okay, that's
Under the tracks,
right.
up the switchback ramp, across the sidewalk,
Okay.
and over in this location, the sidewalk meets the platform grade before it goes up the hill.
And on the south side as well, obviously.
Yes, and that's where, on the south side is where they have their ADA parking. If you look for their ADA parking, you'll find where those two grades meet. It's
Okay.
just for an instant.
Okay,
So-
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to visualize.
Does that help?
It does
Okay,
help it.
good.
Thanks, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Next, please. Okay, and then the view as if you just got down off the platform and you're looking north. Walk down the sidewalk, state store, things happening in the plaza, a large planted area. We tried to consolidate one place where we thought the biggest massive planting might do the most benefit. It's also in a place where if you could manage stormwater, that would be the place to do it. Because of the utilities underground and because of the elevation of that part of the site. Next. Thank you. Okay, and then this one is cut through the square with the egress drive. So we're showing a service vehicle. This use kind of takes away a little bit off of that sidewalk, or what that might be, and it starts to compress this a little bit. And this is what it looks like on the plan. Next, please. I'm almost done. We said we were going to come up with a funding strategy. Not only did we come up with a strategy, but it was like, okay, go. And so we started writing grants for you. You got 4 grants written. You got the plan done, and you got 4 grants written in 9 months. It's kind of unheard of. So kudos. Like, now you got to go make sure that the state reps and the agencies really come through. They were good applications because they were good projects. But what we showed was there's different sources that can get money, including the borough, and your commitment to go after the first state funding for multimodal fund. That's what leveraged that, and then those two were able to leverage the federal money. So your decision to put money into your own project gave you the power to go after those other funds. Next, please. So, starting to conceive of how the ADA system might, for the station itself, might work with the Station Square. If you're going to go after the funds for Station Square, all the partners who might fund you are going to say, well, can you get to the station? Is it going to be ADA accessible? Is it going to be equitable? You had to have a solution, so it was worth doing that work that was needed for the grant applications. Now we know there are strategies to get accessibility to that station. And that's what's going to get you in the door, that you have that strategy. The funding for your Station Square, a lot of it can be separate from those other projects. They can proceed independently, depending on which funds come in and how the partnerships will end up working. Next, please. These are the formulas. So the borough put in 60 for Pennsylvania DC multimodal request of 270. That total leveraged 1.32 total project going after a federal funds. Those three match each other. Okay. And what can get done if all 3 of those come in is bringing your design for the ramps, the tunnel, ramps to the tunnel, the ramps to the bridge, and the underpass design through final design. Okay. So we had to show a team for that. That's in the application. We used them to help us figure out how much that would cost to bring it through. Once you get to final engineering completed, that's called construction ready. And that's when you can go after implementation funds. Right now, we're still in the engineering phase. Next. This is what the total project would look like. The ramps for an underpass, ramps to Station Square, the ramps to your bridge on Narberth Avenue, and the stormwater system that could start with the collection from areas and Station Square, run through your existing stormwater system, and then the idea of how you might do stormwater management and combine that with park improvements. And that's the DCNR grant part of it, and your recent acquisition of 3 Elmwood. Next. And then in the next steps, 230 Haverford project is important to Station Square because the needs of the developer are going to inform how those projects work together. They need to be integrated for everything to work. And then the idea of how you might use architecture. And this shows, can a canopy system be extended? Can it be effectively a pedestrian porte cochere? These are ways to put art and put treatments into a building that not a lot of people like. Some people like it, but not all. And could you make it function better as well? Could it become more of your streetscape? These are big ideas. We're not going to go any farther than that in this phase. Actively support your pending grant applications. And we got a call back from SEPTA and Amtrak about the, from Jody Holton got a good letter of support for the federal grants. Jody Holton at SEPTA. So meeting with SEPTA and Amtrak again is the next step. I think we're just about done. So in 8 or 9 months, this is where you got to. It's remarkable to get this much done in eight or 9 months, and I think we're done.
So this may be beyond what you do, but I'm curious when you talk about ADA accessible for the train platforms. We can get somebody, say, in a wheelchair up to the train platforms. When you come into 30th Street, the platform goes directly onto the train, so you can get directly onto a train. Here, the trains are still just a giant jump from where the platform is.
That's why we said platform. But Narberth, geometrically for the trains, is on a horizontal curve, which super elevates, right? And so the trains are on a huge tilt.
Yeah.
And because of the curve and the tilt, it's hard to get, it's a really intricate design to get a loading platform up there.
Yeah.
It's even retrofitted so that your station has steps rather than just the steps that are on the vehicle.
Right.
So we couldn't get into the design, the ADA design from the platform to the train level because that's strictly Amtrak and SEPTA. It needs to happen.
Right.
But what we were focusing on were the things that we thought either the borough could do by themselves or the borough could entice those partners to help them with.
Okay.
So getting to the platform.
You can just get to the platform. There's still a major barrier to getting on the train.
Right. So anybody, let's say in a wheelchair, they could go from eastbound to westbound platform if these improvements are made, right? But then they still, to get on the train, you still need another ramp system of some kind, right? Or a lift system. And those, when we met with SEPTA and Amtrak for this phase, they said, we have no plans, we have no schedule to deal with the accessibility of Narberth.
So Narberth is really not accessible for anybody to get on a train, for anybody in a wheelchair.
They are doing things, right?
Okay.
In what seems like glacial time. So what we suggested and what the borough has done is to be proactive on the things that the borough can advance and show that you have capacity to advance them. And then you're not going to be able to do everything all at once. So you say, all right, well, these things could start, and then challenge your partners to get those started so that you get something started. The big item is the idea that came out of the committee, which is a new underpass on the Essex Street alignment. And if that can go in, that starts to create mobility for bicycles across the tracks instead of going either through the underpass on Wynwood or going up the steep Narberth Avenue, right? It could be used for certain emergency vehicles. It's envisioned as ADA accessible and multimodal, but not for regular vehicles. It would also start to enable stormwater improvements that could serve both SEPTA and the borough. Because a project of that size would require excavation. The engineering studies could identify what could be done. The whole north side of the borough, south side of the train tracks drains down Elmwood. Right? Topographically, that water could flow through the underpass and drain down Haverford, and then be treated in your parks before it flowed downstream. So physically, those things can happen with the right projects. If you're thinking about them at the right time, early. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it gives a sense, it went beyond my initial concern. My concern is, how does someone get in a wheelchair, use our train system?
So let's say you start showing progress and you're going to get part of your project done.
Mm-hmm.
Then the impetus is to all the partners, we need to start planning to get people the last step onto the train, right?
So we're doing
why
what we
can't, so do we have to raise the entire platform, or can we raise an ADA ramp section of that platform like you've done in other places?
Right.
Why can't we get that started?
Right, because I would like all of our citizens to be able to use the trains, the train station. It would be nice.
The thing that you can't do is you have no leverage for what's in there right away.
Right, of course.
These other things are not all in the right of way.
But if we're doing what we can, maybe they can do what they can.
If you start one thing, it tends to help the other things get started.
I see.
And if we haven't done what we can do, and they someday do say, hey, we're gonna actually get the platform to meet the train loading level, and we haven't done our part, it's gonna take a long time before it's then fully
right.
accessible.
And they're not going to know what you want or need.
Well, that too, but to me, it makes sense for us to, if we can do it, let's start. And, you know, because you're gonna need it anyway.
We're gonna need, yeah, absolutely. Makes sense.
Yeah, a multi-piece project, you have to start somewhere.
I think what Bill is saying is you shame them into doing their work.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And that's, be proactive.
We don't want them shaming us into doing our part.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, the infrastructure bill just funded some of the huge stations. I think there's ADA improvements in Jefferson. So those are the things that they've had on their wish list because of the volume that people they have to serve, right? So that's part of their decision making. You've got a high volume for a small community, but it's not like Jefferson, right? So you need to do everything you can to push your project up.
And it's not, as our population ages, it's not just people in wheelchairs. You know, I get a little older, it's a little harder to make those steps. I mean, it gets a little harder to jump to get on the train. Yeah.
You've done a lot. If you haven't read the grant applications, parts of them are really accessible reading.
Good.
Okay. So other ones
Excellent.
All right. So thank you, Bill. It was exciting to see these plans come together, and thanks to the committee. You know, it's great work. I had two questions. I wanted to ask about it looks to me like cobblestone, and the possibility of more impervious surface is just a question that I have. Because when I look at something like Dilworth Plaza, for example, I see a variety of surfaces. You know, there's gravel sections where people sit in bistro tables, and then there are other sections that are paved. And I just see, I see much older projects that are completely impervious, and it seems to me newer projects are less impervious. And clearly you have green spaces, but I'm just curious if there's even more room for impervious, or what your thoughts are.
Okay, first question, right?
Yeah.
I'll answer that one first. What we did not want to do was get into material selection, but if you have those pavings patterns that we showed, if you have the capacity for volume storage for stormwater, or if you have the capacity to perk stormwater, then permeable paving makes more sense. You can also have a belt suspenders where you have permeable paving, but when the volume gets too high, it runs off and then goes back down in let's say a gutter, which might look like gravel, but is a more permeable material. Sometimes the permeable pavers don't make sense if the runoff is just you're going to be able to collect it and run it in to, let's call it a stormwater cistern below. What we wanted to do was look at the utilities in the right-of-way of Haverford and also the utilities that exist underneath Station Square. And most of the utilities underneath Station Square, most of them would probably have to be removed anyway because they serve uses of the existing square design. Lights, water. Utilities in the Haverford right-of-way mostly are your main utilities that you want to try to avoid. Your large stormwater, your water, your gas. I think there's electric. And so in the right-of-way for Haverford, which is linear, the row of trees on the north side, we think you can get that planning environment offset from the line of major utilities. Okay. We don't have all the elevations this way, but this way we offset it. We didn't put it over the utilities. The massive tree planting area, if you're going to excavate that and make it really a vital environment, then there's an opportunity below that to store stormwater or treat stormwater. We don't know what the soils conditions are there yet. We don't know what the chemistry of the water that runs onto your site is yet. Some of that is designed to be answered with the multimodal and the RCP. The idea of looking at the utilities inside the Station Square proper, we think there's opportunities to treat stormwater either way you're describing. The planted surface areas do that, right? Especially if you build them new in a modern way. If you're using old urban soils, probably not so much. So the idea here is if you're creating planting areas, make sure the soil is a really, it's as modern as the rest of the plaza. And that those soils can be mixed. So we thought about that. The designs aren't final. Materials aren't selected, but all your options are open.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, very much.
Okay.
That's great. So my second question was just about the water feature. And I guess that could still be developed in different directions, but I was curious if there's kind of new thinking about, I can imagine classic parks from the early 20th century that have a water fountain in the center.
We showed it as like a classic water feature. What we tried to do was give you the idea that it could be in different locations. What we didn't try to do was design it. And so I think that when you get into design, I designed one major fountain in my career. It was really early in my career. And my boss said, "Can you design a fountain?" I said, "I've been to Iran. Of course I can." That's what they do there. But and then it was a whole learning curve. And it didn't work. It was outside of Boston. It only worked 4 months a year, right? It was beautiful. It was sculptural. It was all those things. It reused granite. You could want to consider a spray pad right? There's a lot of things that you could do that could integrate with this and wouldn't use up that open, flexible space necessarily. I think all your design options are open. The committee advised us to show the water feature, but once you hang a design on it, people think that's what it's going to be. We didn't really want to try to make it a design, but we wanted to try to acknowledge that water is important to this community and show that you have options of where to put it, the size, what it would look like. So we made a simple circle.
Okay.
It's a Mr. Turtle pool, actually.
Okay.
And move it around.
It's not a bust of you, Jim, with water.
Yeah.
It's kids throwing coins.
It's an option, as Bill said, there are all kinds of options.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right. Well, I'm just going to say, so Michelle, let's see. I understand we hope you solved your microphone problems.
Well, you told me.
All right.
Yes?
Okay. Fantastic.
Okay.
Do you have any questions or any comments?
No, I don't. Just thanks for the wonderful presentation, Bill, and all the great work you've done.
Thank you. All right.
I guess my only question is, what are next steps? I'm just curious where things go from here. And this was wonderful. I'm like really excited about this, so I'd like to know where things go next.
You're lucky to have a great committee. Really fortunate of the skill in your committee. And Samantha. Samantha is highly experienced in not just managing your consultant team, but also what's needed to bring in and negotiate with your funding partners. And what I would suggest is that the agencies and elected officials, they really respect Samantha, and they also want to talk to people who vote in Narberth. So they want to talk to us, but they also want to talk to the leaders in Narberth, or the champions in Narberth, who can really explain the projects, the nuances of the project, and the strategy, and all the enthusiasm coming from the borough. Because in the end, they can be great technical applications, but it comes down to some political decisions. So they have to feel it. They have to feel that need and pressure. The ADA accessibility, absolutely as urgent as any community. It's just whether or not you can put in the technical applications that compete, and I think you have. And now it's like getting out there and pushing it. So that's a recommendation. The next thing is keep the communications open with SEPTA and Amtrak, and I think you're ready to do that in the next phase.
If I add on to that, Bill, thank you for your kind words there. So in terms of the grants that we applied for, I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll get word one way or another on the multimodal application by the end of next week. And obviously whether or not we get that will inform a lot of how our efforts move forward on it. The federal grant funding, with it being a new grant program and that sort of thing, we haven't, Bill and I haven't gotten clear direction as to when decisions can be made on that. So, but ultimately the multimodal is the most important part of this, because if we don't get the multimodal, that dramatically reduces our ability to leverage the federal funding. So, hopefully next week we'll have that, portion kind of figured out in terms of our funding. And if we're awarded that funding, then I think we can kind of start to talk about what, the next phase of design will look like and how we want that to work. I think the other big thing that council, as Bill mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, it's not a decision that has to be made tonight, but I think in the near future, the question of option A versus option B, in particular the egress, I think council has to give some thought to and some direction, because obviously it's going to be tough to do more detailed design work if, if our planning team doesn't know that component of it. So those are kind of two things I kind of see coming up next with the project.
I think that the decision on what the final design is going to be, whether A or B, is still a couple months down the line. I mean, that's not an immediate decision.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If you get the multimodal, you're in business. And then the phones go on fire and you tell the Congress person, we just got the state grant. Guess what?
Assuming that we have a congressperson who's been
Yeah.
sworn in by the next week.
Yeah.
50-50.
Yeah, well,
11 probably.
even though they're still just elect.
That's true.
They can't take constituent phone calls right now.
What is it? Even though they're still elect, they can still pick up the phone and call the Secretary of Transportation. This is the kind of thing that you can do, and everybody else does, and you want to do.
Thanks for the presentation and the advice.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Looks great.
Be in touch.
Yeah, appreciate it.
We're done.
All right.
We're doing other report.
It's so nice, we so often, at least at our council, where we have folks come in and do nice presentations, and then the partner disappears, or the principal disappears, and we get the new person in, and how do Bill see this through?
Yes.
And the quality, and meet the expectations.
Oh, that's true.
It's always been the person in small borough.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
Close that door. This conversation. All right. Exciting possibilities.
Yeah. Also.
Let's move on to 7B, which is the Planning Commission vacancy appointment. So this was postponed from the last meeting.
The thinking at that time was that we were missing a member who wasn't with us, so they couldn't vote. We're missing a member again tonight. I don't know if our similar rationale follows. That's my recollection of why we postponed.
That is why we postponed. We had 5 people at the meeting, and 3 of the 5 asked to postpone it. I don't actually like that as a precedent. I think that in general, we should be making appointments and kind of moving through our routine business as much as possible. But that was the will of the majority at the time. So I guess my preference would be to move forward with this unless people wish to make a motion to table it or otherwise tell me that we shouldn't go on.
Yeah, I would say unless there's a lot of dissent or uncertainty amongst council about the decision we made, I think while we're not obligated to make a decision, I think the work of the planning commission is too important to leave them shorthanded, so to speak.
I'm not seeing any such concerns, so I'd like to start off discussion.
Well, I would suggest that, Michael, we can talk about the 2 candidates, right? So one of our candidates, Michael Galdini, is very expert, I think, at the policy level, and I have actually suggested directly to him that he put his name forward for council. I think our other candidate, Jennifer Yancone, is an architect, and her skills would clearly serve the planning commission, especially at this moment where we have this big project. So I guess that's where I stand. Is I would suggest we appoint Jennifer to the commission, and I'll personally lobby Michael to put his name in the.
Wow.
Point of information.
Yeah.
So at the meeting last month, that conversation came up, and the borough solicitor informed us that that Mr. Galliani is not eligible to be on borough council because he's not lived in the borough for a year.
But, right, for the appointment, that's right. But he could run in the next election cycle.
If he were to so choose and the people of the borough were to so elect him, yes.
Right.
Wow.
Be eligible for the, in November.
I think Michelle has.
Michelle?
Oh, yeah, thank you. And just to let you know, when I'm using this external mic, because the mic here isn't working, then your sound cuts out, everybody. So I'll just talk and then I'll be quiet and then I'll hear you again. I'm sorry. I don't know why my sound is all messed up. So I was going to actually suggest that, well, they're both great candidates. Michael's, I think, policy experience and background, and also experience working in land use development. He has kind of a very, very strong understanding of land use policy and of our zoning code, because I've had multiple conversations with him about that. And I think that given that would be replacing somebody on planning commission who has that same kind of skill set, very much of a land use and policy orientation, I think it would be a really, I would advocate to appoint Michael at this time, sort of respect his wishes to be on planning commission, knowing he has many, many years left in the borough. And I think in the future, he may decide that he wishes to run for council, but for now he's decided that his contribution, I think, would be to the planning commission. And we do have a fairly architect heavy board. We have 3 full-time practicing or recently retired architects and a 4th member with an architectural design background. So I think that it would be a better balance if we would move forward and appoint Michael at this time to the planning commission.
Okay. I think this is another time where we have an embarrassment of riches. We have 2 absolutely wonderful candidates. I'm so excited that they're both relatively new residents to the borough. Although I recognize Michael grew up here, but he's been away for a significant period of time. And they're both, someone who's a senior citizen, they're both at the younger age of the spectrum, and that excites me very much. So I'm really thrilled to have both of them putting their names in. When I look at how do I decide who I would want to support, I have to look at what the Planning Commission will most likely have coming before them this year, which is a lot of the things that actually Jennifer has had experience in. Multi-use development, mixed-use development, affordable housing, green building. And so from that perspective, I look at that and say, well, she may have the skills or the experience that they need immediately. And I realize that Michael may have some of that too, but it just reading the resumes, that's kind of the way it looks to me. And I also, in the interest of more diversity, recognize that appointing Jennifer would bring more gender balance to this commission. I do recognize that there are already 3 architects. I think, though, I don't know, my experience has always been in my field when I was working was that people who were coming from, within a few years from school or a little bit later than that, always brought in perspectives that us older folks hadn't picked up on. And so I found that it was always great to have this new infusion. So I don't find that as much of a concern that that she's an architect and we already have 3. So anyway, I'm happy with both, but my first pick would be Jennifer for the reasons that I laid out.
I don't want to reiterate what everyone said. This is, again, an example of embarrassment of riches. I think we should figure out a way to engage both of these folks because they have a tremendous amount to give the community. Michael has reached out since he's been back on policy issues and questions. I've engaged with him the most in conversation. He always leaves me something to think about or consider, and I do really appreciate his focus on policy at this point in our time. I do want to respect his wishes that right now perhaps he doesn't want to run for council and wants to be focused on the planning commission as well. So I would support his candidacy and ask that how can we involve Jennifer, though, in the planning commission, invite her to go to meetings, look at who is going to be seeking reappointment and when, and that timeline is, how can we encourage her to be kind of on board on that, or whoever, or Michael, if he is not appointed right now, but we really should utilize both of these folks' skill set.
I agree. Yeah, we need both of them.
We need both of them. I would support Michael in that. I've had conversations with him multiple times and really appreciate his lens on policy.
So in addition to what's been said, I will agree that these are both excellent candidates, and there may well be vacancies on the planning commission starting next year in January. So there may be an opportunity to have both of them serving on the planning commission next year. I think that we have to go with the application that Mr. Cody has made, and so honestly, my tiebreaker is just general outreach to council members and to, there's a question on the application, and we asked, well, have you watched a meeting or have you attended a meeting? And I think of the board that you're applying for, and Mr. Cody said, yes, I've watched the meetings. And, don't think I can pronounce her last name.
I think
she said no.
Oh, did she? Okay, I know she's talked to Todd, but
Yeah, so I guess that would be my tiebreaker for for an appointment for people who seem equally qualified.
Yeah, well, that's, and like you say, maybe in January,
yeah,
could be another position.
If I can offer another option, there may be some history here I'm not aware of as well, because I do think at one point I do believe our planning commission had 9 people on it, and I think we brought it down to 7 for some good reasons. The municipal planning code does allow you to have up to 9 members. It also allows you to have up to I think 2 alternates. But I also don't want to recommend something that the borough in recent history found to be problematic and moved away from. But that is another option at council's disposal if you so chose.
The size of the commission is written into our code.
No, it's in the municipal planning code.
Yeah.
Now change, yes, you are correct, to change the size for the planning commission, you would need to do an ordinance setting the membership number.
Yeah. But I'm sorry, so we could make a motion, let's say, to appoint
You could appoint someone tonight
and an alternate.
And then you could go through the process you would need to do to either appoint an alternate or expand the size of the commission.
Can we appoint an alternate without doing an ordinance?
Yeah.
Unless
I think an alternate, I forget if an alternate requires, I think an alternate at minimum requires a resolution. It might require an ordinance. Expanding commission absolutely requires an ordinance.
I'm not sure I'd want to make something like that without consulting the chair of the planning commission.
Like I said,
it is an idea.
No, it's definitely an idea to consider.
So you could tonight appoint someone and then have further conversations down the line about if you want to provide some other opportunities for the other applicant. And then, like we mentioned, there may be future vacancy opportunities that person will be one of the first we could think of for.
And Fred, I actually really appreciate, because we asked that question for a reason. Have you attended? Do you view the meetings? And it's important. And Michael has reached out to us on numerous occasions. He tends to make comments for favor. I do think that's a good point to ask Ms. Icone. I'm going to say Jennifer too, because I can't pronounce her last name, is to say we're really interested and impressed with your talent. We really invite you to please attend the Narberth Planning Commission meetings, and we can follow up through F&A and say, here's the schedule of reappointments, reach out to Todd and say, hey, can folks kind of give us their intentions on whether or not they're going to seek reappointment, so she knows that timeline?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
All right, would someone like to make a motion?
I move to appoint Michael Gaudini for Narberth Planning Commission.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Wait, sir, who are we giving the second to? I guess, Rob?
I did.
Okay.
Michelle.
Pardon.
Arm wrestle
All
over.
right, is there any further discussion? Okay, we're voting to appoint Michael Gaudini to the Planning Commission. All those in favor? Michelle, I see your hand up. Okay, it's unanimous.
Yes, I.
All right, and we can speak to Mr. Bressi about some of these other options. See if they make sense. All right.
And they may not. I certainly will not have any hurt feelings or anything if they don't.
Doesn't hurt to have.
And I mean, we've done this for, there have been like reserve members of the EAC and things like that in the last few years. So it's something that has been done in other committees. All right, we have one action item, which is a job description and advertisement for the assistant manager position.
I apologize. I don't think I wrote a motion sheet for you all for that. So just wanted to put that out there.
Well, we have the description of the action item. Would someone like to make a motion based on that description?
Sure. I move that Borough Council approve the job description and advertisement for the assistant manager position.
Second?
Second.
All right. So that advertisement is in the packet. Further discussion? Samantha, do you want to?
Sure. So I just want to make sure, in particular, that council is comfortable with the salary range offered. The job description itself is largely based upon the job description that that we had before for the assistant manager. To her credit, about a year ago or so, Michelle Carroll gave some thought to that job description, made some suggestions to it that were incorporated into this one. The job advertisement, I'll admit I piggybacked off of our Director of Public Safety police chief advertisement we have out right now, and added some language based on things important to me and things that I've heard that are important to members of Borough Council. So that's where these two documents, their genesis, and if anyone has any specific concerns, I'm happy to address them. And then otherwise, I said I want to make sure the proposed pay made sense as well. And then otherwise, if that's all good, we'll get the wheels turning on all that.
So first, do we have any comments on the pay scale, any concerns about the pay scale or the advertisement? I don't see any concerns from council. What's the, give us a timeline?
Yeah, so what I would like to do is, if on the latest, if either, I don't know if I'll be able to do it tomorrow or not, but on the 9th, if I can get it out, out to the world through the various municipal sources that these positions get advertised. If anyone on council has any suggestions of where to advertise it as well, I'm certainly very open to that. I'd like to set a deadline for applications January 27th. I think giving people about 3 weeks is kind of like about the ideal amount of time. And then I'd want to do interviews, around the week of around the 30th. This might be a little bit of a stretch. Council has a business meeting on the 2nd. Work session on the 2nd, and then business meeting on the 16th. Absolutely, 100%. I want council in position to be able to make confirm a hiring decision at the February 16th meeting. But hopefully, the last week of January, the week of the 30th, interviews could be done, and by February 3rd, for the power invested in me per the borough manager ordinance, I can make a conditional offer to someone on the 3rd. The week of the 6th, it can handle background checks and all that sort of required stuff, so that council can confirm a hiring decision on the 16th. Something I previously had discussed in our executive session about this matter that I'll again don't need to decide tonight, the meeting on the 19th. Is I would certainly welcome if a member or two of council would like to participate in those interviews. I would certainly be open to that.
All right, we can take it up again on the 19th. Did you have a question?
I'm sorry, that feels like such an ambitious timeline, 3 weeks out.
Oh, I really want someone.
I totally understand that. I think it feels really optimistic. Is this something that the minor center will send out to their folks? I mean, that I'm assuming that 3 weeks is an informed ambition, that you really know that where you're going to target this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be like the MOPCO, it'll be the Bucks and MOPCO, like, manager consortiums. It'll be the I'll talk to Nicole about the distribution list for the minor center. It'll be a couple places I've dealt with before.
If you're right.
And also, I mean, it'll be, the programs, the MPA programs at
Temple.
Villanova and UPenn and Temple, so yeah.
All right, so this motion is still on the table. We do need to vote. So unless there's any further discussion. All right, we're voting to approve the job description and the advertisement for the assistant manager. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Michelle. We just have our committee reports. Infrastructure. Ara's not here. So do you have Michelle, can you want to summarize, or should we wait for?
We did not have an infrastructure committee meeting in December, so I think I would tell you the date of the next meeting, but I don't have a calendar in front of me. That's the only thing I would say. When is it? What's the date?
Next infrastructure meeting.
It's on the 24th at 1 p.m.
All right, thanks, Michelle. F&A.
So I was in Amsterdam, so Barbara chaired F&A, and so she will review it for us.
Sure. There's just a couple of things to mention, I think. The committee suggested some changes to the recurring park users questionnaire, where the Parks and Rec Board wants to start soliciting information from the recurring users so that we can start to put together agreements with them for their use. And so made some suggested changes, and now the Parks and Rec Board is going to be sending that around to their folks or their contacts. We talked about
that meeting is going to be in Parks and Rec, right? It's not going to be in F&A. That user meeting or the user.
Oh, yes. That's sent to Dennis.
Yeah, sent to Dennis. Yeah. Yes, this is all. Yeah, Parks and Rec now is got it.
Okay.
Yeah. We also talked about an idea that Cindy had of when there are large issues or projects or changes or anything that might be of general public interest because of the impact that it's going to have, that the committees, through the chair of the committee, could put together text, photos, links, whatever they wanted, something that was like a publicity item, and have someone in the office put it on the borough's website and post it to the borough's Facebook page. That would really be the only work that the office staff would have to do, is to just post it. It would be up to the chair and the committee to actually draft whatever piece of communication they wanted to go out that way. So we talked about doing that, and thought that would be a good way to get interest, get items that would be of interest to the public out in a timely fashion coming out from the committees, if we put that responsibility there. We talked about that we might then want to have someone on council, perhaps the president, reach out to the administrators of some of the local community Facebook groups and ask them to just keep an eye out on the borough's Facebook page so they could share the posts whenever things out there. I mean, I think they do that sometimes now, but because this would be sort of a new initiative, maybe it would be good to just let them know, hey, there's a new thing coming, and so there might be more there now. So anyway, that was a suggestion that the committee thought would be a good thing for us to, a good way to improve or enhance communication, what we already have.
So how would that work? Because the vote is after the committee, right? There's a committee meeting, sends it to full council, the council has the vote, it goes back to the committee chair to draft something.
So I envision not even a vote of just that, hey, here's an important agenda item.
Yeah.
So for example, the parking, the EIT, there have been some things, even the stormwater, where it's been in our agendas, but the public has said like, hey, you should call our attention to this. And in an ideal world, we want everyone to look at the website and look at the agenda. But I was thinking back to, gosh, I don't think I was on council with any of you at the time, where I used to do this newsletter, another failed communication tool, where I said quarterly, each committee, give me your hot topic items. I'll put it in a one-pager.
Yeah, I was there.
Were you there? Okay, I thought it was the week before. Okay. Of something where committees can just do, again, hey, we have an EIT on our agenda. You may want to take a look with a link to the agenda, a little image, and send it. So nothing that you were debating, but just you may want to go to the original source and know that this is available. And hopefully if we post more on the Narberth Borough site, people begin to follow it because there's routinely activity, there's routine activity on it.
So you're suggesting that it go to the borough's, okay, so what's the outlet? So the committee writes something and then it goes where?
To Samantha, please put with a picture. I mean, when I given anything to Samantha, it is already formatted in Canva for a Facebook post with a little bar that she edits as she sees fit, and then Missy posts it. And the comments are off.
Yeah, and if it's something that you think, oh, well, this would be good to have a posting on the website or in the weekly newsletter, you would tailor that
So
to that.
let me rephrase it. Yeah, so the way I envision it is the committee comes up with the content, it comes to me for editorial review, and then also me and Missy then determine the best methodology to get the information out to the public.
That's
Okay.
good. That's good.
Can I ask, how many people subscribe to the weekly newsletter?
I think, off the top of my head, I think it's I know it's a 4-digit number. I forget if it's 1,000 or 2,000. It might be more than 2,000. It's definitely more than 1,000.
I mean, that's a super easy way. We're already, connecting with 1,000 people in the community every week. Is there any way to increase that number? And any way to get more?
I do not know. That's a good, that's certainly we want to reach it.
It's already there. The infrastructure's already there. If we can get more people to open up this email, it's already in their inbox.
We had talked about this at the death of the meet and greet, of doing a retractable sign at events to say, learn more about council. And we could do a QR code, which is just the flash sign up.
Well, how about, we used to do banners across Haverford Avenue. Can we do, that's an easy one.
Those are really expensive.
Yeah.
We could do it to tell people to sign up for something, but I wouldn't want to do it to
No, I mean,
oh, gotcha, yeah.
just want to know what's going on in the borough, sign up for the weekly newsletter. And just that way it's right there, just get one.
Yeah, so I am hoping in the future, it's something when we have time I want to talk more about with Public Health and Safety Committee. Borough staff recently did a training with the county on use of, it's to the public, it's called Ready Mopco, but the internal software is called Everbridge. And there are opportunities on that to send both emergency and non-emergency communications. I don't know if we would do this or not yet, but I've started giving some thought as to whether, instead of telling people, hey, you need to sign up for Ready Mopco for emergency and the flash for non-emergency, if it's possible to move all of our communications over to the Everbridge platform. Now we have that, and then we can just tell people, if you haven't signed up for Ready Mopco already, sign up for Ready Mopco, and then you're getting emergency alerts and Borough News. And the nice thing about that system is it's not just email. Like, you tell that system how you want to receive communications when you sign up. So you can tell it, like, I prefer to get notified about things via text message, or even via phone call, or via email, or even via fax. It has, everything.
Can I ask?
Michelle?
I just have a question, because I wonder if Everbridge, or if you know, has my dream thing that I've always wanted to be able to do, which is to be able to easily code communications for sublists. So people can say, I want to sign up to get communications, general communications, and like general borough stuff, and the finance administration committee, or something like that. Like,
so the way it worked in Bucks County is, in Bucks County, you were allowed to choose which mailing list you wanted to be on. And when you sent a message out, you could pick which mailing list it went out to. It looks like in Montgomery County, they, for good reasons, it looks like the way they're having municipalities use it is in a more simplistic fashion. But it's definitely, I know from Bucks County, that it does have the ability to do that. It's just, we as a municipality don't have the ability to create those sublists. We would have to ask the county to do it. Not to say that's impossible, it's just, it's not 100% in our control, but I could certainly ask the county if we wanted to do something like that.
oh, okay, yeah, that sounds like it's difficult to do, but thank you for the explanation.
Sure.
In the meantime, if boards, commissions, committees say, oh, hey, here's an agenda item I think the public may be interested in, even if you don't have Canva and do an image, if you shoot it to me with hey, you may be interested in this, I'll do the image and can send it to the office just to put it on folks' radar, if that's something you all are comfortable with.
And the other thing that I was thinking as we're talking about this is it doesn't have to be something, oh, here's something coming up on the agenda that you might be interested in. It could be, hey, wondering how this thing turned out? Here's how it turned out. Absolutely. Like the stormwater compact.
Absolutely.
So I think, it's to think about what might be of interest to people, and especially if it's something that started, 6 months ago, and because of the way time has to work and how we get projects done, we're now at an ending phase, but people aren't paying any attention now because they were paying attention in the beginning, and it just would be a nice way maybe to wrap up some things too. So,
all right, I see a lot of interest. Samantha seems to be on board with this, so let's try it for a couple months, and we can talk again and see how it works out in the next few months.
The other thing that we talked a little bit about was creating a 509A organization that could accept donations for, green space acquisition, improvement, other kinds of things. We realized that there were some issues that the committee really needed to fully weigh in on before we brought anything to council, so we tabled that to our January meeting. So we'll have a conversation when all three of us are present. And our next meeting is January 19th.
It's a good project for the new assistant borough manager to take on, setting up a 509A.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not pressing, so I don't think we need to do that right now, but there have been neighbors that have expressed the desire to invest.
Sure. It's a good idea.
So we want to give them a shell to do that at some point.
All right, thank you. Public health and safety.
Okay, so the Police Advisory Committee and Environmental Advisory Committee continue to meet, and we're grateful to the chairs of those committees. And we have our first municipal EV in the lot, a Nissan Leaf that will be used by the parking controller. And that's just the beginning, right? Soon we'll have an electric police vehicle.
Yeah, we're hoping to have the the Ford Police F-150 Lightning in the next, I think maybe it's soon, next month or two.
Yeah. So, so my thanks to Sargent and Samantha for working on that. So, we continue to hear a lot about traffic concerns. That's the #1 concern that comes to this committee. And at our last meeting, we heard from 8 residents about concerns on Iona, the 200 and 300 block. So this was the most we've heard about any one traffic concern. So this has really become a focus for us, and our manager is going to work with our traffic engineer so we can figure out a next step. But it's something, I just want to say we really have heard the residents that came to that meeting and wrote into the committee, and we need to find a solution. So we're going to be working on that in the committee. And this year is the last year of our trash contract with Republic, and so we plan to work on the solid waste ordinance this year in committee. The timing is right with, thinking about the next contract and trying to get everything aligned. So I think that'll be a major project for the calendar year. And there's lots of other things we want to do, including this 509A that you're working on in F&A is of interest to our committee as well, because the EAC is recommending that the Green Fund that now has been established by our manager be funded in part through private donations when possible. So that's, and possibly in the form of carbon offsets. We're not there yet, but you could imagine a family taking a vacation to California and wants to offset the fuel and is willing to make a carbon offset donation to the Green Fund that then could be used for rebates to residents who are buying heat pumps, for example. So we're also reviewing the burning regulation with the fire chief.
I've heard a meeting just against their plastics. Ban?
Is that right? Yeah, and plastics will also, we want to get to that this year as well. I mean, one thing we're sensitive to is we know we don't have an assistant manager yet, so we're going to have to try to pace the work, so that it's manageable.
Yeah, and I will be talking to committee chairs to talk about workflow for the rest of the year. So expect to hear from me over the next couple of weeks about planning out the year's work at the committees as much as we can.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks. Ad hoc party?
Yes. So we met on December 9th, and I've had some follow-up conversations after that with Manager Bryant, and we also met with Jeff Eldon, Manager of Public Works, to talk about how do we find out what our current enforcement periods really are. And unfortunately, when the GIS data was put together in 2016, when there were interns here doing that work, they did not include the enforcement periods. They just noted that there was a 2-hour parking sign, but they didn't say what hours or days that applied to. So the Public Works crew is going to be utilizing the GIS data to help them to do a survey, an inventory throughout the borough. Is there anything else I need to say about that, really? We don't know yet a time frame for that. They're getting, there's some changes that need to be made to the GIS system itself for them to be able to use it fully, if I understand it correctly. So,
yeah, we want to overlap with the work they're already doing with the GIS with the stormwater and sewer inspections and such. That would almost be like if you use like the GIS map that's currently on the Borough website, there are like different layers you can choose for things. So that way internally we would have like, you know, the storm sewer layer, the sewer line layer, and then the signage layer, you know, to really get a sense of build this inventory of what our assets are. Because, you know, any changes that we would make to consolidate some of the enforcement, Public Works is also going to need to know where, you know, where the existing signage is to update it.
So they'll be letting us know what their timing is for that. So we'll know when, because we really need that before we can come to council with, you know, anything more really. It doesn't make any sense for us to look at a draft ordinance or any of the resolutions that we need to make any of the recommended changes if we don't know exactly what enforcement periods we're talking about. So we're going to, while, you know, this track is going along to get the enforcement data, we're going to continue to move, mostly me working with Solicitor Walco, getting the ordinance drafted so that once we do have the enforcement periods, we're kind of ready to come to council with that so that a decision can be made. We don't have any future meetings of the committee scheduled at this point. You know, my recommendation is that we kind of hold the committee in suspended animation for now. I don't anticipate that there's going to be anything that needs to go to the committee, but if there should be something, I think it just makes sense to say, hey, it's still there. If we need a third member at that point, we could ask council to appoint someone. So I think, you know, we kind of see, we'll have a better sense once we get this data from Public Works and know whether there's anything there that needs to be delved into more deeply than we'd want to have to do at a council meeting. So.
All right.
That's my report.
So just in terms of council, the legislation is going to be on hold until we get that information.
Yeah.
And probably will incorporate it into the framework that we already have. So a couple months, I'll be revisiting this topic.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Okay. Are there any announcements? Comments for the good of council? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So, I'll second.
All those in favor of adjourning? All right, meeting is adjourned, and we do not have a executive session.
Correct.
So,